We're going to take a look at Google Spreadsheets, which is a part of the Google package of programs that you can use that are free to use. It operates very much like Excel. There are some differences, but a lot of similarities. So suppose that you are at your drive and you want to create a new spreadsheet. So just as is the case with any other kind of document, you click New. In this case, we go down and we are going to select Google Sheets, and we get something that looks like this. Google will take a minute. It'll tell you that it's working, and then when these become sort of clearer, that means that you have your connection to the internet correct, and you will have your Google spreadsheet ready to work. Okay, so this is what the Google interface looks like. Up here, we have the title. Right now, it's Untitled Spreadsheet. So I can click in there and I can change the name of this. We'll call this Test 1. Along here, I have the menu, where you have a number of what should be fairly familiar options. For File, we have a whole bunch of options, and some of these are very different with Google Spreadsheets than would be the case with Excel. Because, for example, you can share a document, you can import a document, which we'll look at a little bit later. And what that means is that you could actually import an Excel spreadsheet into Google Spreadsheets and work on it and change it into Google Spreadsheet, or you could then download as an Excel file. So not only is Google Spreadsheet similar to Excel, but often the files are interchangeable. You can open it with one and then save it as the other format, at least with Google Spreadsheets. Then we have here a series of icons that take care of certain kinds of common functions. So printing, undoing, paint format, which we'll talk about later. There are some formatting options here which have to do with, let's say, whether you want to represent numbers as currency or as percentage, or change the number of decimal places. You can change the font size, bold, italicize, etc. Over here, we have some things that are more specific to spreadsheets. For example, some of the functions, which we'll talk about later, and some filtering, and some other things that, again, you can explore at a different point. This is the formula bar, and what this shows is the formula for the selected or active cell. Right now, as you can see, this rectangle right here, which is called a cell, is highlighted in blue. That's the active cell. And if there were something in that cell, it would show up here in this formula bar. So as you can see, there's a series of columns here. Each one is given a label, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc. We have rows that are numbered, A1, 2, or 3, 4, etc. So every rectangle or cell has its own name. So for example, this cell right here is in column C and row 5, so we call this cell C5. The column name always comes first. We will be using formulas that will make references to other cells, and you'll see that that's an important thing to understand, is how the naming of the cells works. Okay, so let's just now type in, let's say we want to type in some names of students. Let's say I'm going to use this to keep track. So I have Al, I have Bob, I have Charlotte, I have Darlene, and I have Eduardina, and I have Francisco, etc. So I'm just typing in, and then to go to the next cell in the column, I just hit enter, or I could use the arrow keys. The arrow keys also enable me to move left and right. I can also use the tab keys to move right, and shift tab to move left. Okay, so now let's say I want to say enter their test scores. So I just type in some numbers here. Let's see, 79, 66, 85, 99, 100, and 85. Okay, so now I have these, and let's say I decide, well, I actually did not do a good job with this, and I think I should boost everybody's score by 5 points. So I could just go through and I could say I'm going to add 5 to 79, add 5 to 66, but I'm going to do something else. I'm going to call this the adjusted score. And here, I'm going to enter now a formula. In order to enter a formula, I have to first enter an equal sign. Once I enter that, Google Spreadsheets will be looking for a formula. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to take the score that's in cell B2 and we want to add 5 to it. So I type in B2, and you can see that when I did that, Google highlighted the cell that I'm referring to. And now I'm going to type plus 5. Now when I hit enter or return, that now becomes an 84. So that formula told Google Spreadsheets to take the value that was in cell B2, add 5 to it, and put that value into cell C2. Notice that when I click into this cell and make this the active cell up here, it doesn't show me the value 84. It shows me the formula that underlies that. So I want to do the same thing down here. So I could just type in that same formula. So here I would type in equals B3 plus 5 equals B4 plus 5, etc. But here's the power of spreadsheets. When I make this the active cell, and then when I grab this little blue box and drag it down here, what Google Spreadsheets does is it copies the formula down, but it does it in a smart way. It recognizes that I don't want to just keep adding to cell B2. I want to add to cell B3, B4, B5, etc. So when I click into this cell, what it shows me is that Google automatically adjusted the formula so that in cell C3, the formula now says equals B3 plus 5. In cell C4, it says equals B4 plus 5. And so that's what's called autofill, and it's one of the things that makes spreadsheets powerful. Okay, so now let's say I want to sum or find an average of these. So I'm going to select all these cells here. So now they're all outlined in blue. And I'm going to go up here to this thing right here, which gives me some functions. And I'm going to pick average. And what Google Spreadsheets knew was that by selecting these cells, I wanted the average of cell B2 through B7. I could also have just typed in equals average and then in parentheses B2 colon B7. This little expression here, B2 colon B7, is important because this is the way you can refer to a range of cells in a spreadsheet without having to type in the name of each one. So now when I hit enter, I see that Google has averaged these. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to average these. Oops, that was a sum. I'm going to replace that with the average. And now Excel, I guess I have to type that in, C2 colon C7. And now I have the adjusted average, which not surprisingly is 5 points higher than the average of the originals because I just added 5 to everyone's scores. Well, let's say I wanted to think about, well, what if instead of adding 5 points, I multiplied everybody's score by, let's say, by 1.01. I added 1% to everybody's score. Something very similar. I type in equal B2 multiplied by 1.01. Hit enter. I'm now going to copy this formula down. Now I have all my new scores, and since these are all selected, I'm going to go here again, and I'm going to find the average, and I see now that my average score has gone up by 1%. So let's say I decide, maybe I'm going to have it go up by 5%. So I change that. Now I have to recopy that formula down. And so I grab the blue box, drag it down, and now as you can see, it adjusted all of these scores. And I have a new average which was automatically updated when all of these scores changed. Now, since we're dealing with Google Spreadsheets, we don't really have to save it explicitly. All we have to do is, once we exit out of here, Google, just like it does with Google Documents, automatically saves this, and it'll save it with the name test1.